Hey, what's up, guys? We're here with Kyle, our resident salad expert, and we are going to be doing a masterclass on Salamangreat. Kyle here spent hours making this really long PowerPoint about everything you need to know about Salad in 2023 between matchups, or just how to play the deck, because with the new support, it's a lot of navigating. A lot of different builds have opened up, and Kyle has really been testing all of them, so I think he's the best authority on this topic, and this is going to be the best way forward for Salad. I'll let him take it away.
Yeah, in case you don't know, I'm Kyle, Salad player at Genesis. Yeah, that's basically it. I've just been testing a lot with the new cards and different variants that I've tested over the time since God knows how long. I've been playing this deck for 4 years. But yeah, let's just get started. So the amount of variants that this deck has is just a good amount. I'd say there's like 4, maybe 5. And hopefully the next ban list does take care of the problem matchups that this deck definitely suffers from. Now, I'm not saying that this deck is like bad by any means. I'm just saying that while it can win a regional, I don't know exactly how well it matches up against the top decks that you would find at any higher events like Nats or a YCS. But this deck has a lot going for it, and we'll get into it. It is a control combo fire cyber stack that takes advantage of these 3 points. It has an incredible resource and grind game that's set up by 1 or 2 card combos. The 1 card combo being normal summoning Salamangreat of Fire or Flame Buffalo, and the 2 card combos being like Signet Mining. And yeah, Flame Buffalo is also a 2 card combo, but Salamangreat of Fire definitely allows this deck to go way beyond what it normally could, because sometimes you just need to open Buffalo and a Cyberse monster, but now that's not necessary. 2, it's able to link climb and play the generic Cyberse link package. It can go down Access Code Talker lines while also being able to link climb into the new Link 4, which is just a really good boss monster that a lot of decks are not prepared to deal with, specifically the revival effect. And it can recycle its interruptions and slot in a good or big amount of hand traps or generic disruptions. The recycling of your interruptions include your Salamangreat back row, Ash Blossom being recycled with Sunlight Wolf is also good. You can also recycle kaijus like Dogoran and Kurikara Div Incarnate. So that's the one thing that this deck has really going for it that a lot of other decks struggle against. And now we're going to get into how these variants work. Basically, these slides are designed to inform you on how to play these variants, how to optimally build extra decks and side decks for them, and how to construct your main deck so you can play as many tech cards as possible in said variant, while also not letting them hinder your game plan. So the first one, Fire Salamangreat. This is the most notable one, given that Sean Washington did really well. He won the regional, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so Sean won I believe a regional that was about 300 people, which is definitely a sizable regional, and this was, I think, the first weekend after the release of the set, which was pretty insane for the deck, in a meta with full power Kashtira, Pearly, and Unchained and Branded Chimera rolling around, being able to just go right through all of that, cut right through of that, in a meta with a draw. I thought that really, I can see why the Salamangreat of Fire is definitely the best new card that came out, or one of them, because it's just an insane card that allowed that deck to just go through the whole meta.
Yeah, so Salamangreat of Fire is a 1 card combo that leads into your reincarnation of Raging Phoenix, and you recycle and obtain a good amount of card advantage while doing it. And since it's a 1-card combo, you have a lot of open slots to play Ash Blossom, Nibiru, Book of Moon, Droll and Lockbird, other kinds of cards that other decks would probably have to sideboard into. You can just main them in this deck, giving this deck a huge advantage over decks that are not prepared to deal with them. So it is a really potent, hyper consistent combo deck that can set up a game-winning advantage loop if it isn't addressed properly. It can play the Access Code Talker package. It can also default into playing regular Sunlight Wolf control if it's hit by heavy interruptions like Droll and Lockbird. And it has a really good grind game, which can cause most decks to fold after specific board breakers. Like, if you go Dark Ruler and then Evenly, and then you normal summon Salamangreat of Fire, if that entire combo is not addressed, the Mirage Stallion is going to bounce the only other monster on their field back to their hand, meaning they're restarting from basically nothing.
What are you referring to with the Sunlight Wolf control?
Sunlight Wolf control is basically toss format Salamangreat, where Sunlight Wolf was your boss monster. Basically, the entire idea is that you would reincarnate the wolf, bring back either Salamangreat Rar or Salamangreat Rage, whichever one you had in your graveyard. Then you would use Jack Jaguar to return the Sunlight Wolf to your extra deck, summon it to the zone it points to, and use Wolf's Effect to bring back either Gazelle or Ash Blossom, depending on which one was in your graveyard and which one you needed more. And so that by itself is a representation of 3, maybe 4 disruptions every single turn.
Also, I think the fact that the boards you end on are basically not kaijuable / like Kurikara-able for the most part, which is pretty huge in this meta. And then also, like, board breakers don't do a whole lot against you. It's really like a well-timed Droll is kind of one of those things that we'll see in the downside. We'll talk about that in the downsides, but it really does have a the end board uninterrupted is extremely potent and hard to play through because it's an Omni Negate plus a pop 4 on top of hand traps, and whatever other cards that you ended up with. So it's very good in that regard.
Yeah. Every single deck, every single variant that I mentioned will have upsides and downsides listed to them. It is not because I'm telling you the negatives because I don't want you to play it or get discouraged from playing it. I'm letting you know so you can play to your outs. So the downsides is that this deck suffers against Droll and Lockbird and Nibiru if you don't have proper answers or proper play lines to deal with it. Some tips: if you are going to play Crossout Designator, I would suggest main decking Nibiru at 3 alongside it, so you have an ability to go first by cross-outing a Nibiru, while also being able to go second by just having Nibiru in your deck. Same thing would go for Droll and Lockbird. Activate Salamangreat Circle in the draw phase, so they can't Droll you on that search.
I think Crossout's very much good in the deck, I think, for this build.
Yeah, Crossout's something you gotta look at. Also, Triple Tactics Talent is also really good in this list because this list puts up a lot of cards that your opponent probably is going to hand trap. Cards like Salamangreat of Fire, Salamangreat Gazelle, and Mirage Stallion are all potent Ash targets. So if they Ash you on that and you triple tack and look at their hand and get the Nibiru out of it, they're playing with a total of 4 cards to deal with your pop 4. That doesn't sound like it's a likely win for them if it's in game 1. Raging Phoenix can get hit by a Kaiju. This specifically hurts the deck when your only Salamangreat back row is Salamangreat Rar. Rage, not so much, because you can like bounce Gazelle back to your hand with Mirage Stallion and then use Sunlight Wolf to bring back Salamangreat of Fire. But if it does get Kaiju'd, you can definitely like summon Gazelle, but turning off 1 interruption while also getting rid of your boss monster really hurts this deck. It is incredibly linear and very predictable in terms of its gameplay pattern, because like you can normal summon Salamangreat of Fire, or you can normal summon Flame Buffalo and keep going from there. But if your opponent knows exactly what you're doing, they can probably play to your outs harder than you can. So be wary. And sometimes your only starter is Salamangreat of Fire. So you have to fire lock yourself in order to play the game, which cuts off access code talker OTK lines, which has actually been innovated by the Salad community. There's a new OTK going around with Proxy F Magician, Pit Knight Early, and Salamangreat Violet Chimera, which I'm currently testing in my new build. I don't know if I'm going to keep playing it, but I probably will. And next up, Adventure Code Talker Salamangreat. So this deck uses the Adventure Engine to play around cards like Nibiru and a 1-card Link Climb into Decode Talker Heat Soul with Jack Jaguar. It does not have as many spots to play generic cards, but you can circumvent it by just playing the deck as is to shut out most decks. Notably, this deck does very well against interruptions, specifically board breakers. This deck can play around Nibiru, and it can also bait hand traps with the Adventure Engine. It draws a lot of cards over the course of the game, which always gives you the ability to play. You can create scenarios for your opponent with cards that are in your deck that makes them go down suboptimal play routes in order to just play regularly. And you can OTK really easily with the Adventure Token and Wandering Griffin Rider being pointed to by Decode Talker Heat Soul and any other Salamangreat monster.
Also,
so
you're able to run non-engine because you're not locked into fires, so Fenrir is easily abusable in that build.
Yes. Yeah. The one thing about the upsides is you can play non-engine, but you don't have to if you don't want to. But here are the downsides. It is not susceptible to Droll and Lockbird, but you can end up hindering yourself by the very nature of your deck. Specifically, your opening hands are just sometimes unplayable if you brick really badly on your engines that you're playing, because you need to properly sequence them. So, for instance, like, let's say you have Fateful Adventure in your hand and a good amount of hand traps. What are you doing? You're just playing like the Adventure Token control and hoping that it works. Since you have less Salamangreat names due to the fact that you're playing outside engine cards like Microcoder, the entire Adventure Engine, Kustira Fenrir if you want to, this deck's grind game is hindered a little bit due to the fact that you're not easily accessible to the recycling of all of your resources. And this deck, due to the nature of Decode Talker Heat Soul's effect, can lose in time if you don't like immediately win on the follow-up. Because let's say you're going up against a deck like Runic Stun. Runic Stun can basically lock out your battle phase with Messenger of Peace. So if you don't have Salamangreat Foxy or Salamangreat Heatleo in your extra deck to remove it, you're pretty much done for, because they're just going to start banishing your entire deck, which you've already drawn through a majority of from Fenrir Search, Microcoder Search, Flame Buffalo, Desires, Heat Soul. You're basically playing with like 10 less cards in your deck. Not to mention the Adventure Engine is also just free removal of cards from the deck. So you have to be careful with this deck, because there are some times where you just like lose to Floodgates or like lose in time.
So is this also, so people know, is this in order necessarily, or are we going to just order it after we go through them all?
This isn't ordered. This is more so in like... Actually, no, this is ordered. This is ordered into the first one being the one that I would tell someone to bring to a high-level event. As they go down, I would be less encouraging of bringing these lists, because the downsides will become more apparent. Not saying that the lists towards the end are bad. They're not. It's just they all have downsides that get worse and worse and worse when talking about a high-level competitive event.
Sure. So, okay, let's get into Synchro Salad.
Synchro Salad is my personal favorite. I love this deck. It's so funny. You get to use Salamangreat of Tiger, who's a level 5 tuner that can summon itself by discarding a Salamangreat card from your hand, and then you can increase or decrease his level by 1, and it can help you make Baronne to floor while also facilitating regular Salad combos. But the one thing is that generic cards oftentimes do get pushed aside due to the fact that you need your engine of Salamangreat names constantly to access Baronne in order to play around Nibiru. Baronne plus any Salamangreat trap with a Link Monster on your field is basically game winning if your opponent doesn't have a way to break your entire board. You do get to play the Heat Soul engine in there, so if you draw off Raging Phoenix, you can... So if you draw off Heat Soul and then search off Raging Phoenix, that could be 1 or 2 extra disruptions that you're getting basically for free. It has a really good grind game, and it can break boards that are less than optimal because of Baronne's pop along with the Salamangreat traps. And you can use Baronne's effect to pop your own Raging Phoenix, trigger the other's effect in the graveyard, summon it with 5600 attack, and those two can perform the OTK if you need to.
Very strong points about the deck. Like, some of the people who were watching your short about that reference, you know, the Baronne combo, they're like, oh, you just sub a Baronne and that's all you get. And it's like, no, you sub the Baronne plus a reincarnated Link with a Salad trap, and that is really good on its own. Like, so
yeah, like, obviously this list does suffer from some things, which I'll just get into right now. There is not enough space for you to go ahead and actively play non-engine cards. So it kind of kills the deck's competitive viability because you're just going with all gas. The Synchro lines do take away from the Link lines if your hand is not made for doing both. The grind game does suffer because since Tiger is your starter and not like Flame Buffalo or Salamangreat of Fire, if that card gets negated, you lose. There is nothing you can do. Being a 2-card combo deck in this format is kind of iffy. I wouldn't say it's bad. I would just say if you're going against decks that are like 1-card combos like Kashtira, Branded, Dragon Link, or even decks with Brazilian 2-card combos like Unchained, Marincess, you're probably going to get destroyed if you aren't careful. And since your disruption is split while not being consistently available, your opponent can just bait out those disruptions super easily. And once they do, you kind of might be in a situation where you'd have to scoop because you just don't have the grind game to recover. And now for the funniest version, Floodgate Salad. This deck uses Floodgates like Goes and Match, Rivalry of Warlords, in order to basically set up a scenario where your opponent can't summon any of their monsters. And you have the Raging Phoenix to get Rage or Roar to prevent your opponent from either setting up with back row in the case of matchups like Labyrinth or Trap Tricks, or breaking your board in the scenario of like Kashtira. And this deck can play a lot of going second cards and hand traps, but the Floodgates can really mess you up. Like, I cannot stress this enough. Even though the deck is mono-type and mono-attribute, both in main and extra deck, not having access to specific cards really hinders this deck's ability to OTK, even though the OTK is probably on the first turn anyways if you go first. You can use Tiger to slot in a Burst Griffin package to revive Barrier Statue of the Infernos to make the window of play even more difficult for your opponent. This deck is really good at going first because it can bait out interruptions and then just floodgate your opponent out of the game while you're perfectly fine under it. Your sideboarding is incredibly smooth because most of the Salamangreat names are in your deck at multiple copies, like 3 or 2. So you can decide those out for your board breakers or your setup plays for when you're going into game 2 or game 3. And since you have Rivalry and Gozen, if your opponent nibs you at the wrong time, where they can't actively kill the Nibiru token with the Nibiru they summon to their field, they're going to lose the game unless they're playing a deck made of light monsters and or rock monsters.
Do you still end on a trap plus a link 4 on that with this build?
Yeah, of course. It's super easy.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's the same combo. It's just you instead of it being a true 1-card combo, sometimes you have to make it like a 2-card combo, but it's fine. It's much like Synchro Salad, except its game plan isn't dependent on whether you open Tiger. Its game plan is dependent on whether you see a Floodgate. So Flame Buffalo is better in this build anyways. The downsides is that it is still very linear and very easy to stop. Most back row removal cripples this deck. And it auto loses to decks that just don't care about the Floodgates. Like, if you only have a Rivalry and you're going up against Unchained, you're gonna lose. Their entire deck is Fiends. Or like Marincess, where you have to have like either one or both, or you have to like use Weasel's effect to give them a monster. If you can't do that, you're going to lose. If you don't have Salamangreat Rar in your back row, you auto lose to back row disruption. If they can get rid of the Floodgates, you're just playing a worse version of like the Sean Washington list, which is why the generic cards in this deck matter significantly more. And if your extra deck is not designed to play in game states where you have both Gozen and Rivalry on the field, you're not going to be able to kill your opponent. This deck takes time to kill your opponent, but that time can easily be wasted if your opponent draws cards to out your current setup. The good matchups. You're not going to win every single matchup you have, but amongst these 3, Salad
that was the
does
last
have a
build.
really good matchup.
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
It's just 4 builds, but
Okay.
the 4 variants are fine. Pearly as a matchup is somewhat difficult to deal with because they might just end on a guy and you can't do anything about it unless you break their board, which relies on trap cards or Nibiru, or you have to open Book of Moon or Impermanence, but it's fine because you're playing a huge quantity of those cards. Also, you can use Foxy to destroy straight Pearly Street and Heat Leo to shuffle in My Friend Pearly, making their Pearly searches wastes, because instead of getting proactive cards like the traps, they're getting their consistency cards. Also, Salamangreat Rage is really good in this matchup, and Book of Moon is also really good. And now we're going to move on to Unchained. I haven't actually fully tested against Unchained, but I know they lose to Nibiru. Side out Book of Moon, side in Dark Ruler, evenly matched, or Kurikara, or anything. So
are you saying, are these the easy matchups, or are these kind of like variants? So like Pearly, would you rate like on a scale like 1 to 10, how easy is that matchup, or how good is that matchup for Salad?
I'd say it's like a 60-40. It's relatively even. It's more so dependent on the dice roll, because like playing against Noir sucks. Like that's just it. Like if you don't have a Kaiju for Noir or like a Kurikara after the first effect and you have to like bleed through your entire hand just to like play, you're gonna lose. But if you go first, you can basically stop Pearly from playing entirely.
And I'd say without more testing the Unchained matchup, I'd say you have a pretty fair matchup because you're able to run a lot of non-engine that just gets around the Unchained shenanigans, which is what you need to get to out Unchained. You need space in your deck to get rid of their combo lines and to stop their Link 2. So, which you have a lot of, but when you don't see that and you rely on and you have the Pop 4 is not looking pretty good. You know, you'll want Pop 4 against them. But
no, I'm going to be honest with the Unchained matchup. Here's 3 things of advice. One, if you're looking to search Rage off Phoenix, don't. Search RAR. RAR is significantly better against Unchained because if you RAR Tour Guide, they lose. They don't have extenders. And if they do have extenders, you can probably just hand trap them away.
That's why I think the matchup's actually pretty fairly like straightforward, essentially.
Yeah, I'd say it's like a 50-50. It's not really as determinable of who goes first is the winner of the game. It's more so who can outplay the other. Also Heatleo's really good in that matchup if they like set their Unchained cards and you just shuffle them back in the deck. That kind of makes them lose. And onto Runic. Runic specifically seems like it's an awful matchup, but it isn't. And here's why. You can Foxy Runic Fountain and Heatleo the Messenger of Pieces.
You're talking about Runic Stun, but I will have to say for the people watching, the most common variants would be the Runic for Hire and the Runic Live Twin Sprite. So, but you're saying in terms of Runic Stun, you definitely have a pretty good matchup, would you say? Because we've gotten you on feature match against them before, and just your ability to be able to out their back row is just huge. And for that reason, we could lump, I guess, Runic Stun and Labyrinth together if you want to, honestly, because they play very similarly.
Yeah, they play very similarly, but the issue mainly is that like the difference between the two that makes the Labyrinth matchup way less easy is that the Labyrinth deck will have a battle phase. That's what makes the matchup so easy. It's not that what the Runic Stun player is doing is difficult to play around. It's that they can't kill you.
So I guess, this should apply to the other builds then too.
Yeah, if you want to beat Runic for Hire, just like Ash them on Rex and they lose, or like Droll them on Fossil Dig and they lose, or Nib them on Resolution of their combo. Same thing with regular Runic Sprite. They don't, and like Live Twin Runic Sprite, they like don't put up enough interruptions to deal with a Nibiru. Here are some bad matchups. Kashtira. It's relatively obvious, but that guy with the red armor looking suit is not fun to play against. Dragon Link. Dragon Link isn't a bad matchup in the sense like you're going to auto lose it. It's that its ceiling and grind game are way too much for a less than optimal hand to deal with. And since they can put up a good amount of disruptions and huge guys, you have to be very careful with how you address a Dragon Link board, specifically Hieratic Seal's Druis Worm. That combo is so nasty against this deck. And Branded, if Branded goes first and they can play past your Ash Blossom, you lose. If they can't, you win. If you don't have Ash Blossom, you lose. So my advice, just open Ash Blossom.
Also, sides help a lot too in these matchups, of course. Like,
yes,
in Curry Kara, the fact you can run Curry Kara, I think actually makes these matchups very dealable. It's just that these are the matchups you are going to have to really rely and craft your side deck for on the event you're going into. You have to be like, where are these like 5 decks that, you know, I have these bad matchups for, essentially, to make up with your side deck.
Yeah. Another bad matchup that I didn't put in here, I'd have to say, is Labyrinth. And the reason that Labyrinth is so bad is because it just takes away from your consistency. Specifically, if they erad you and call trap. If you open a Salad Trap, it's so hard to play with your opponent knowing exactly what you're doing. Specifically if they're a trap deck. If the control deck knows what you're doing, they're not going to let you do it.
I have a few more. Go on.
Mm-hmm. But in terms of just a regular Labyrinth matchup, I would say that it isn't abysmal to the point where you would like need to proactively side against it. But just be aware that if you win the dice roll against Labyrinth, you auto win the game. Just search out Rage and pop all their set cards and deprive them of everything. If you're going second, just side in like evenly matched or something.
I want to go. I don't know if you have another slide for matchups, but I have a few more matchups. I just want to pass by you.
This is the last slide for matchups.
Okay. Rescue Ace. It's a mid-range deck. It's very mid-range, but it's a deck that can play under and above Nibiru and with a set 4 that, you know, a couple interruptions and a guy that has a quick play Book of Moon. What would you say is what would you say to people if they're looking for things to get around Rescue Ace? I mean, I was looking at Phantasme. I've seen a lot of people side for because Phantasme really does, because it gets rid of their target Book of Moon. It also hits the Unchained matchup for that reason too.
Yeah, if Link decks do get more powerful after this ban list, I'd say Phantasme is a pretty decent side option, but like the one thing that Rescue Ace does lose to is they lose very hard to Forbidden Droplet. Droplet is so insane against every deck that's not cash. Because, one, it's proactive. You can use it to your advantage to stop your opponent's effects and in the damage step if they threaten your monster. 2, it's reactive. You can use it as interruption as well as the first point where you just stop your opponent from stopping you. And 3, it can trigger Gazelle. So if you activate Salamangreat Circle in the let's say you're in the draw phase against like a branded player and they activate Albion's effect to revive Gimmick Puppet. You can go chain Salamangreat Circle, chain Droplet, send the circle you activated and anything else in your hand, like specifically a Salamangreat name, to negate the effects of the Albion, and if they have a Dragoon, the Dragoon, anything else, just get it off. And then you search Gazelle, and then you can activate Gazelle's effect in your hand because it's in your hand by the end, at the end of the chain in which a Salamangreat was sent to the graveyard. So I would suggest, if you can get them, Droplet takes care of Rescue Ace boards and Dragon Link boards very well. And it also helps you play against branded if they're going first. But more often than not, I just say like the one thing you want to have in your sideboard is board breakers that don't proactively take away from what you're doing. In decks like the Fire build, I would not recommend Lava Golem or Sphere Mode since they take away your normal summon, which is like detrimental against the decks because sometimes it's all you have.
I want to also add a caveat because you were talking about pure branded versus Chimera branded. I know you might not have tested.
Chimera branded loses to Droll.
Chimera branded also doesn't run all the fancy buttons that pure branded deck does, and they don't control lock you either.
No, they don't.
So it's a far easier matchup, and
it's significantly easier. All you have to do is like Droll them on Mirror Sword Knight and then Ash their branded fusion, and the game is literally over.
And also they end on a discard plus like Rindbrum, which and sometimes they don't even. So it's like a lot of the time you're able to play through these things and play around the fact that they have the graveyard negates by getting rid of their Gazelle. So yeah, I guess we can go on to the next. Or actually, I want to also mention, I guess, at that rate, Tier Limit and Manadium quickly.
Manadium loses to Nibiru somewhat consistently. And,
yeah, the deck's just kind of like you win die roll, you lose die roll, or have hand traps or don't.
Okay, so the cool thing about Tier Limit is that if you're going up against it, and you're going first in game 2, you can still side in Kurikara. Because if they open Havness, you just let them play, and then you get rid of their board, and then they instantly lose.
That's really and it's also so tier cash. So
tier cash is the exact same thing.
Yep.
Just side in board breakers, specifically Kurikara, like Haiju's like Gamma Seal or Dogoran, and just be wary of what your opponent is doing, because sometimes you just have to play into stuff in order for it to just get it off the field. Like, you might have to lose a salad name, but it's fine.
Also, Fluanderies, Marincess, and Heroes.
You want to beat Marincess?
Yeah.
Play a kaiju. You want to beat Fluanderies? Ash Robina. What was the last one you said?
But also, like, can you play through, like is the flu matchup hard at all?
The flu matchup is only difficult when you let them get their full combo.
Okay.
That's it.
And then I got Heroes and Vanquish Soul. And Math Mech.
How to beat Math Mech? Oh, that's kind of tricky. Curry Carr is really good against them if it doesn't get sent from your hand to the graveyard.
Also, your branded sides should hit them pretty hard because you just ash the diameter.
Yeah. Actually, no, you'd want to ash.
Or sorry, not that. Sorry, Crow the diameter.
Yeah. With Vanquish Soul, just like ash stake your soul and hope they don't open that fire guy that wins them the game.
Yeah, because they're able to play a grind game alongside you.
Yeah,
so it's a tricky
their grind
matchup.
game is like super susceptible to not doing anything. Like if you've set up Raging Phoenix, none of their interruptions are going to do anything to you.
I was gonna say it's not that hard of a matchup. And then Heroes and Minkonko to finish it off.
Hero is just one of those decks that like you lose to Nibiru and then Ash wake up and their turn is over. You can also like Book of Moon and Book of Eclipse their board. And
can you play through Dark Angel?
Dark Angel?
Yeah.
What does it say? You can't activate spells?
Yeah, when you activate them, they get destroyed and negated immediately.
A good way to go about it is just to, like, normal summon Salamangreat of Fire, search out Gazelle, and then make a Nightmare Phoenix.
Well, you're here to hear first, folks. Alright. Those were the matchups. Thank you. Let's go on to the next.
Also, Minkonko is, like, insanely easy to beat. Just like Heat Leo, their equipped spells, they die.
Make them go first.
Yeah! That's it. That's the entire matchup. Same thing is true with Dino. Let them go first and then break their board.
Okay, cool. We got literally all the matchups. Sweet.
These next two slides are just going to go over cards that you can play in the main, side, or extra, and they're more so a framework of how to build your decks, as some things are better at dealing with other decks than others, and everyone's experience at like locals, Nats, regionals, YCSs, they're going to be different. So I'm not going to say like these cards are absolute mandatory, but I would just suggest one thing. Play Heat Leo. Stop telling people it's bad. Stop listening to the people who say it's bad. Play Heat Leo. This is not code. Okay, so main deck staples. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, Nibiru the Primal Being, and Book of Moon / Book of Eclipse are fantastic in the decks where you can include them. Cross-out Designator is really good with any variant that's not Adventure or Synchro Salad, because at that point you're just wasting deck slots for nothing. And Fenrir is fantastic in the Adventure build because it just sets up another piece of interruption, and it's just insanely good in that deck. It just gets cards out of your deck, and it's just Fenrir. Extra deck staples, Link Decoder, Splash Mage, Update Jammer, Transcode, and Access Code Talker are also really good for breaking boards and basically pushing for game. But if you wanted to play into the pure fire variant with Salamangreat of Fire and Salamangreat Mirage Stalio in mind, then you can do an OTK with Proxy F Magician, Pit Knight Early, and Salamangreat Violet Chimera, which you can set up with Weasel, which is like really, really interesting. Basically what you do is you reincarnate Raging Phoenix and then search out Will of the Salamangreat, activate Will, send it to the graveyard. You bring back any 4 salad names. It doesn't really matter, but you have to keep a monster on your field with more than 1,000 attack points, which is like easy. Then you use the Phoenix and one of them to make Proxy F, and then you use 2 others to make Pit Knight Early. You activate Proxy F's effect to fusion summon, and then you chain Pit Knight early to target one of their monsters, negate its effects, and make its attack 0. Then you fuse Proxy F with one of your salad names to make Violet Chimera, who will gain half the attack points of the monsters used for its fusion summon. So Proxy F's at 14. All you need is 1,000 to push it to 4,000. And then you attack into the monster who was targeted by early. And whenever Violet Chimera battles a monster, if its attack is different from its original attack, Violet Chimera's attack points double. So that's a clear 8,000. Also, afterwards, if you don't kill your opponent, you can use the Pit Knight early and the Violet Chimera to make a Sunlight Wolf. And then you can just like do Sunlight Wolf control from there on out. It's perfectly fine.
All right. Yeah, I think that really does cover the extra deck staples. They're pretty contained for Salamangreat, at least as of this point. I mean, obviously we do now have Baronne for the Synchro variant though too as well.
Yeah. Also in the Synchro variant, since you lock yourself into Splash Mage to pull off some Raging Phoenix combos, you have to play Cyber's Quantum Dragon in your deck as a second Synchro monster. But that card's amazing. Side deck staples: Kurikara, Div Incarnate, Dark Ruler No More, Forbidden Droplet, Evenly Matched, Book of Eclipse are just really good. Drolling Lockbird and Dimensional Barrier are also insane because they can just straight up end turns. Basically, if you're going up against Kashtira, specifically if they have an Arise Heart on their field and you draw Kurikara, activate a Salamangreat Circle to search out Fire. Arise Heart's mandatory effect will scoop it up, and then you can just Kurikara it off the field. And then you can go into the battle phase and attack over their Fenrir or the Unicorn they have on their field, and then you've cleared their field entirely, and you have an extra fire effect monster on your field. Dark Ruler No More is really good because this deck doesn't really care about OTKing unless it's turn 2 or any turn after turn 1. Forbidden Droplet is really synergistic with this deck because sending Falco to the graveyard can reset your back row, sending any salad name can trigger Gazelle, and sending basically any salad name can pull off full combo from the graveyard. Evenly Matched is fine since you don't care about your battle phase. Book of Eclipse is good for baiting out Ash Blossoms so your starters don't get hit. Drolling Lockbird's good as like a generic hand trap. You can play it in your main deck. This is not like a side deck exclusivity thing, but Drolling Lockbird is better in the side because it isn't guaranteed to do anything against some decks. Like Labyrinth, it's terrible. It's same thing with Dimensional Barrier, but Dimensional Barrier is really good against Branded, Sword Soul, and Purely. If you can flip a D Barrier on Purely, you win the game.
I also want to say Thrust, Triple Tactics Thrust. It's pretty good.
Thrust and Talents are really good in the main deck. The one thing you have to watch out is like sometimes they have non-monster interruptions, but like as I said before, if they ash your Salamangreat of Fire or like droll you on Salamangreat of Fire's Resolution, you can like triple tack to look at their hand and scout out what they have. So if you can play past it, you just like win the game. I would suggest playing Triple Tactics Talent in the main deck at 2. It's really good.
Agreed. I think it does more for the deck than Crossout personally.
That is somewhat true. Crossout helps you when you're in game 1. Triple Tech helps you when you're going second or first in games 2 and 3. Because you can either steal their monsters, rip their hand apart, or just draw 2 cards. And conclusion, it's in a weird spot right now. I'm not gonna lie. It's not like the end-all be-all best deck of the format, but it has really good tools, and there are many different variants. And basically what I would suggest is if you find a variant from this video that you like, I would suggest testing it and then buying it. Some of these lists are not budget friendly. Obviously, like the adventure stuff got reprinted recently, but that's still a good amount of money. Fenrirs are a good amount of money. Baronne's a good amount of money. Salamangreat of Fire, and it's like a real good amount of money too. So it's not like how it was in TOS format where you could build the deck for like $60 and call it a day. But it's still relatively budget friendly comparatively speaking to other top end strategies, and it has a lot going for it against other decks, and the sideboard is super malleable. You can just play whatever you want. And it's also super easy to learn. Combos are like linear. You can just like look at your hand and know what you're doing. But another thing that I would suggest, if you want a more in-depth analysis of each of these variants, specifically speaking, I would suggest checking out the other videos on MetaGamesGX channel about the salad list that I put out.
Yeah, we have all the deck profiles on the channel except for like his Pure Fire build, which we're gonna work on, and that will come out as it does.
Yeah, it'll come out as it does, but for right now, look at the other lists. I go into way more depth there, and yeah, bring him back to 3, or at least 2. He's been limited for 4 years. Do you know that, Chris?
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah,
I'm old.
Yeah, the 4-year anniversary was like last month.
I bet the Salamangreat Discord was paying their respects that day, but yeah, no, I think with the next, we should be seeing him coming back to 2. I think TCG will just bring him back to 2. I don't think they're gonna do 3. At least at first, I'm saying, and then the list after that, once it doesn't like win a YCS, they're like, okay, we can bring it back to 3.
Yeah, most likely.
But I can't wait to see what this deck does more in the future, because the new support's very good. The deck's very good, and a lot of people discount it. The deck's very resilient to a lot of things. It's resilient to most floodgates outside Tikaboo,
Oh yeah, Tikaboo sucks. That card is so annoying to deal with. But there actually is a good way to deal with it.
Cosmic Cyclone.
If you go Signet Mining and you pitch Foxy and you search Gazelle and you have another salad in your name, another salad name in your hand, you can just normal summon Gazelle and then pitch something else, and then like enemy controller one of their monsters, and then Foxy it off the field. Play enemy controller in your sideboard if you think it's funny.
So yeah, I wanted to thank you for coming on and doing this slide. It was very extensive, this was highly requested too. Definitely had a lot of people just asking about various things that we covered in this video, so I hope that this will find them and help people and guide them in their salad journey in 2023, because in 2024, because it's gonna be a long season till next Nats, and I definitely think we'll see more salad in the future, in these tops, because the deck's very good, and when piloted correctly, you can win any event, as Sean Washington proved. So yeah, I also wanted to just say that check out the podcast that Kyle will also be a part of as a main crew member. I think we're still figuring out the name, you said Knights of the Round Table. We'll figure it out, but
yeah, we'll figure it out.
Watch out for that. We're gonna hopefully do this at least once a month. And if you guys like that, keep doing those. So yeah, thanks Kyle for coming on and doing this, and any last words?
Yeah, if you want to discuss the thoughts on this video, like any suggestions you would make to deck lists or cards that you would want to include or talk about, I'm more than willing to talk about them. So comment down below. If you want more videos like this, like the Masterclass series, let us know by leaving a like. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss out on future uploads, and everyone, have a great rest of your day. Thank you for watching.
Bye now.